Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to bring you some updates on banking in UAE. I have been here for a while now and been spending time talking to bankers and opening bank accounts for people and all different kinds of things like that. And so I'm going to clear up a few of the things that you might need to know and hopefully help you out in terms of the types of banks that are going to be more accommodating to you, which ones aren't, which ones are going to require what, and how to make it easier for you, etc. So let's dive into it. All right, so I'm going to loosely divide banking into, let's call it 4 categories, okay? So the first is we have local banks, okay? These are, like for example, Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank, First Abu Dhabi Bank, something like that, right? Then we've got foreign banks. This is like HSBC, Standard Chartered, Citi, etc., right? So those types of banks. Then what have you got? Then you have business accounts, right? And you have wealth management, okay? So I'm kind of just like loosely painting these into different boxes for you. The delineations are not entirely clear because banks will cover multiple different areas, but these things will hopefully be helpful for you, okay? So let's just start with the fact that personal bank accounts, personal transactional bank accounts are the easiest accounts to get, okay? The most difficult accounts to get are sometimes business bank accounts or wealth management accounts, depending. And I'm going to cover off a really important thing here for you in just a second. Okay, so first of all, I wouldn't recommend anyone try you can theoretically open a bank account as a foreigner without an Emirates ID, without residency in UAE. I wouldn't recommend it. It's pretty easy to get UAE residency, and that's fairly straightforward, okay? So going and opening up a personal account, where you would typically want to go if you're not somebody who actually lives in UAE, all right? So if you live in UAE, that's very different than if you don't live in UAE. And what I mean by this is not do you have a residency permit, but do you have an actual address? So there's some important distinctions between do you have an actual address and do you actually live there? Okay, so that's another thing that we're gonna cover. By the way, if you haven't already, please smash the subscribe button, nail the notification bell, share the video if you like it, and let your friends know. Anyway, okay, going on. So if you're in a situation where you say, okay, great, I have an Emirates ID, but I'm not living here, so I don't have a residential address, then just go to one of these local banks, right? So for example, Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank, Emirates Islamic Bank, Dubai Islamic Bank, banks like this. These are pretty easy banks to open up with, all right? Some of them may require a deposit, some sort of like funds that you're gonna secure or whatever, especially if you're gonna get a credit card. But that being said, it's pretty easy. The thing that you will require is typically a UAE phone number at the time, like something to be able to receive a text message from them, okay? And you will typically, you will always actually need to be in UAE long enough to get your debit card, okay? So in other words, what happens is you go into the bank, you can literally like walk into most of these banks. This is really not a difficult process, okay? You walk into this bank, by default it's gonna be a dirhams account, so be aware of that. You're always gonna need to have a dirhams account. And very important thing, never let your dirhams account get down to zero balance because that's where they take fees out of, okay? And if they don't take, you could have $10 million in a dollar account and nothing in your dirhams account, and they will close your account down. They will not move it over. It's not, whatever reason, that's the way that it is, okay? So, all right, great. You're gonna go in there. You're going to apply. It's pretty straightforward. You can sit with a banking officer. You can give them, you're gonna need like, a copy of your passport, a copy of your Emirates ID. Typically, either you have a work contract, or if you're an employed person, then you're going to have your trade license, okay? So that's basically what you're gonna need. Show them the stamp in your passport, and you can go through and get an account, all right? However, you won't get an account immediately. It will take a little bit of time. Sometimes, just depending on the bank, you may then do a deposit into the account. In other cases, you don't do the deposit first, but they're gonna have to give you a debit card, and the debit card will take some time to come. When the debit card comes, you have to go pick it up in person. Nobody else can pick it up for you, and you can only leave it there, typically depending on the bank, from like 30 to 45 days. So now you could open up the account, you could do that, and then you could come back later and you could go through this. That's something that could be done, but not otherwise. Okay, so that's an important thing. Is make sure you stay in UAE long enough to get that debit card. I'm going to give you an exception where you don't need that in a minute, but typically that is the case. Okay, perfect. All right, so now you're started up. Next, if you want to go with more sophisticated banking, you can do wealth management. Okay, typically the wealth management kind of minimum deposit level is around $100,000. Okay, this is where really the intention is not that you're just using it as a bank account. The intention is that you're going to do investments through the bank, right? Whether this means you're buying your stocks or buying your gold or whatever the type of investment is, that's somewhat immaterial, but the point is you're doing it through there because that's how they generate the fees. And they're not interested in working with you if they're not going to generate fees off you. So that's the understanding. And ideally, the amount of money that you're going to hold with them is going to increase over time. Okay? So just be prepared. 100,000 minimum, I would say. You might be able to get away with a little bit less, etc. But really, what are you doing if you're not going to do that, right? So, okay, great. Now, in this case, you can actually you can't open remotely, but you can do all the paperwork and then have things taken care of remotely where you don't actually have to return back. However, what is the big key here? The big key here is that you're going to fall into one of two categories. Either you need a local residential address, and in my experience, the foreign banks typically require a local address. So HSBC, Standard Chartered, etc., they're typically going to require that. There are some cases where you don't need a local address, but if that's the case, you can't be from a huge range of countries, all right? Specifically, for example, you cannot be from the EEA, which is very interesting, okay? So probably can't be from Australia, can't be from a bunch of these different places. So that's something to be pretty aware of, is you may need a residential address. And in general, the entire process, all of this stuff is going to be much easier if you have a residential address, okay? So make sure you pay attention to that. Typically, those banks, at least on the wealth management side, do not open business accounts. Okay, so it's just personal. However, some of the foreign banks still do open business accounts. However, it's not through the wealth management department. Okay, so something like that. Let's see here. Then we've got cases where you want to open a business account. All right, so if you want to open a business account, again, not that difficult to do for a UAE company, right? So very similar to what I mentioned for the personal account. If you go to these local banks, the local banks are easier. Again, in some cases, it may be necessary to have more substantial presence, more of like a real office. It varies case by case, okay? In general, being willing to put down some money and secure a high level of service, take a higher level package with the banking, etc., will improve your chances of getting the account opened, okay? The debit cards that you're going to get are always in dirhams in most of the banks. Okay, there's some kind of move to change this to bring in some US dollar accounts or cards and things like this, but generally that's the case. Like I said, your default account is going to be a dirhams account, so you're going to have to request euros or US dollars or whatever it is that you're looking for. And yeah, that's that. So if you guys want help with any of this, with international structuring, setting up companies, opening bank accounts, what is the best solution for you, where to relocate, etc., you can reach out to me. We can help you. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, or you can check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. And yeah, I'm gonna try and continue to give you great information up to date on what is going on in these places. I'll give you some more updates in the future about what are the best free zones and all this kind of stuff in future videos. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you have questions, put them in the comments below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If not, please tell me why. I would appreciate the feedback. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.